I'd start by making the observation, which is just my perspective, which is I don't think the women are the problem, right? From my point of view, certainly the female entrepreneurs I've come across are just as smart, just as hardworking, just as creative as the other half of the population. So that is not the problem. There's not a pipeline problem. That's just like a bullshit observation that people make. Specifically, when it comes to the investing community, I think there is a difference between angels who are a little bit better than VCs. But for VCs, and obviously Sharon went through all of those statistics, I think the fundamental problem is that, and it's true on both coasts, but like those of us on the East Coast like to call it more out as a West Coast problem. You know, Silicon Valley loves to think it's a meritocracy, yes, which is bullshit. It is not, right? The last time I checked, the population was 50-50, so like tell me why 2.7% of venture-backed companies have female CEOs. Like if you don't understand there's a problem there, you've got a problem. And that is the problem, that they don't understand they've got a problem. And the fundamental problem is, at least from my point of view, that VC, West Coast, maybe more than East Coast, but they've all got the same problem, is a mirrorocracy. It's not a meritocracy.
Mirrorocracy.
Yeah, it says it's a meritocracy. Right. It's a mirrorocracy. It's an ocracy which looks at something and it likes what it sees in the mirror, or it likes to see itself, basically. So from that point of view, you know, unless you change what you see in the mirror, you're not going to change greatly the dynamics. How does that
occur? Because you're absolutely right, I do think. By the way, most of them are not very attractive, most of these techies. Yeah. Just and I'm judging, Sharon, I'm sorry. I'm going to make the judgment. When you're talking about looking, is it the comfort level of seeing someone that looks like you, or someone that you imagine, like everybody needs to look like Mark Zuckerberg, which nobody needs to look like Mark Zuckerberg?
I think there's an element of that, the idea that, you know, and the jargon is pattern recognition, right? VCs, to Nnamdi's point, often go not on analytics, but does this look like something that made him money before? And obviously, 96 times out of 100, it is him. So they're looking for things which are, you know, stereotypically the guy who went to Stanford, did computer science, wears the hoodie. So from that point of view, it's people that look like a particular pattern of success. And I think it's been alluded to in some of the other talks, that's, you know, whether you call that sexism or unconscious bias, it's a human reality, although, you know, frankly, I'd like to call a bit of time out on unconscious bias, because I think, as you said, Cara, that's often an excuse for people to do some damn bad things. And I think it gives too many guys a free pass to say, well, you know, they don't invest in women, they've got unconscious bias. Sometimes they're just sexist.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'll let Sharon in a second. I agree with you. I mean, one of the things that was interesting is we spent a lot of time calling attention to it. And a couple of years ago, I did a story called "The Men and No Women of Facebook," and I just put their pictures up. You know, just their pictures, and it was and I just put, you know, Zuckerberg's at the top, but it was white guy, white guy, white guy, Asian guy, white guy, Indian guy. That was it. Like, there's always one of those, of each of those kind of thing. And they made fun of it on the show Silicon Valley recently, like a pack of 4 white guys. There's an Indian and an Asian guy with them. And what was interesting about that is I got a call from the Facebook people. They're like, this is unfair. I said, I didn't do anything but put up your management pictures and just noted it. Like, didn't you know? We did the same thing around the boards of companies. And Sharon, I want you to talk about this, because boards, I think, are also critically important. And I did it the men and no women of Web 2.0 boards. And this time it was interesting because people like Groupon and others and Twitter, they all were super hurt by it. They're very sensitive. They're very sensitive men, like almost like they're made of paper mache. But you know, I'm very hurt by you noting that, Cara. And I said, well, the Twitter CEO, who's a lovely guy, he just was moved aside. He left on his own accord for personal reasons. So no, he's a great guy. He's a very great guy. But I said, how is it that you have 10 white men on your board? It's really interesting mathematically how that could happen. Like that, it just seems, he's like, well, it just happened that way. Those are the most qualified people. And I said, that's actually like, you know, I'm sure mathematicians for the ages couldn't figure out how this one worked out. I've heard this argument before that they're not, I love Cheryl, but the leaning in thing, it shouldn't be, you know, that you have to lean in so much that you fall over. It creates a situation where it's put upon the women to do this. And I understand the idea of confidence, and I think it's actually one of the biggest issues. But how do you...
But it's not confidence, it's self-assessment, which is different than
confidence.
Meaning
that you want 150%.
You're confident in what you have, but what you've measured is not really where you are.
Right.
But actually, can I just say, I also think there's something in it about the appetite for risk. And, but the first time when we started trying to address the fact that we hadn't female entrepreneurs coming forward for looking for funding, and we ran a female-only fund. Right? Now, just as we were talking earlier about success would be when you don't clap when somebody says they've invested. So success for us would be when we don't need to have a competitive, and this was saying this funding is available for females only. Not one female applied for the full amount of money that was available. In all of my time dealing with investments where there was a fund where you were saying you would invest up to X, I've never seen males not applying for the full amount that was available. It was something where females didn't, they undervalued their time. And I mean, it was something I discussed with
But I see that as the opposite way. So they're actually being riskier by not raising as much.
Well, actually,
so it's not actually that women are risk averse.
They set a lower a set of projections. Goes back to that they will succeed because they set something that they know that they will succeed. They will overachieve because they like to overachieve.
So how do you do the big hits are all, they all do look alike. You have Evan Spiegel, Mark Zuckerberg, you know, Twitter, whether it's a success or not, we're in the middle of deciding. But some of the other big companies, you know, Apple, Microsoft, they're all the same profile. Do you need to have a hit?
Well, I think it depends how big a hit you're talking about, right? I think what you're seeing today is that there are more and more women-founded companies that are exiting. If I think about New York, I think about LearnVest recently got acquired. That's a great exit. I think about Rent the Runway, which is growing really quickly. There are several companies now that are growing, and that will be, you know, multi-$100 million or billion-dollar exits. So those patterns are starting, and those are new. But I think there's data out there. I think Sharon talked about it a bit around failure rates for companies run by women. There's also a statistic that I often cite, which is around amount of capital, kind of use of capital and return on capital. There's a study by Sydney Padnos at Illuminate Ventures, which looked at kind of return on investment. What you see is female founders typically receive less, which is not surprising. At the same time, they do more with it. At the same time, they generally have higher returns with the capital. Adam wrote a great post, which I'd recommend everybody should read, on why he invests in women. He kind of laid out each of the steps. I thought it was really very interesting. And so I think the data is starting to be out there. I think there are examples of companies that are growing really nicely. They haven't yet been those multi-billion-dollar exits. Although, if you think about VMware, for example, that's a female founder, very big exit. So there are data points out there. I think there are going to be more of them. And I think one other point I'd mention is, I think on the other side of the table, what you're seeing is actually more funds being started by women now. I think about Aspect Ventures, which is a new fund with a lot of potential. There's a fund called F-Cubed, Female Founders Fund in New York, which is doing very good deals. So I think what you're seeing is, as a result of oftentimes being excluded from the general partnership levels at existing funds, you see a lot of women and minorities starting new funds.
Do you think that, it was interesting because Nellie covered a lot of the Ellen Pao trial for us with Liz Gaines, and she ran into if I said his name, you'd know it, a well-known venture backer. And his idea was that we have men and women venture firms, period, that we just split them up like they're sports teams, and that then we'll see who does. But said it without, Nellie, I think, thought he was kidding, and in fact was completely serious. At first she was like, you're such an idiot, like in her head. But you know, it was really interesting. Do you look? Should you do that? Should you have something like that? Because he said then everyone would learn to they could just compete on a flat basis, kind of thing.
That's very interesting. It's a very interesting question.
You don't know to say great.
I'm not sure if that. What I would say is, ideally, you'd have diverse groups of folks where you have diverse opinions coming to the table. And I think statistics generally show that when you have diverse opinions, you have better results, better decision making, because you have a range of opinions. That would be ideal. That's what you'd hope to see at venture funds. Unfortunately, it hasn't really happened. And the statistics, if you look at them, they're actually going in the wrong direction. You're seeing less GPs that are women or minorities. So I think what you're seeing now, unfortunately, is that there are funds being started by women primarily that are, at the end of the day, saying we can make great investments. And they're more likely to invest in female founders. That's been documented. And I think what you're probably going to see is very good returns from some of those funds. And I think what you might see as a result is finally some of those bigger funds that aren't diverse saying, okay, we're missing something, or there's something we aren't doing.
Julie, should it be? The evidence is really what's going to make the difference, because it's not an equality issue. And I think for a long time, the issues about, not enough women getting investment and, not enough women entrepreneurs was seen to be, it's not fair. But actually, it's only good business sense. And so from an Enterprise Ireland perspective, we really aren't interested in investing in women because of equality. It's only because we need more really good businesses. And actually, we need diversity. So it isn't, let's the men compete against the women. You need diverse teams in all of it.
I actually haven't publicly commented on it, so I'd love to.
Okay.
I was appalled, disgusted, and pissed. And not by the ruling. By the way, I think the case was walking a fine line on what could legally be proven, and that bar was really high. But if you read the testimony, and thank you for covering it so closely, your colleague did an amazing job of covering, and blow by blow, if you read what happened in that office, blow by blow, what happened in the office was disgusting. And that any person could call it hidden bias. They didn't even dare to call it that. They just called it behavior, acceptable behavior. And then the measure of her was profoundly biased. The objective, or subjective or objective, they just kept blurring the lines of we're going to objectively measure her by this subjective matter. And they fundamentally didn't like her. And this was a reason to not promote her. They just did not like her, which I don't care. You're investing. And by the way, last I heard, you like investing in assholes. That's what I heard them say on stage. I think that's a famous quote out of most VCs is, he's an asshole, but I'll invest in him because he's going to win. Okay, she's an asshole, and apparently that doesn't work. And so I think from where I sit, I was shocked that all of that came out, the how they behaved and how they measured her, and the response after the ruling was celebratory. There was no self-awareness, unlike when the CEO of Microsoft made his Grace Hopper comment that was so problematic. I think he did a great internal reflection, both personally and organizationally, upon what he did and said. Kleiner did no such thing, quite the opposite. And most of the Valley has been afraid to talk because of that. All of us, I think, sitting in our positions have wondered, what can we say without it meaning that I won't be able to syndicate a deal with this fund? And that matters to us. We, as an organization, my board was split on it. Could we comment on it? Should we comment on it? Think about that. We're split on something that was so important to our industry and so worthy of conversation. And if you didn't follow the case, I actually kind of encourage you to, if you're in entrepreneurship, because it was a great learning on how decisions are made in venture firms, and it's not unique to that firm, and how this is a relationship business. And right now, those relationships are very, very insular.
You could wave a wand and have one thing that you could change in this dynamic. If there's just one that you think would create a great change, what would it be? Let's start with you, Julie.
Well, I think if there was more self-belief, and I think that gets back to the role models. So the more role models we have, I think it's going to have an exponential effect.
Okay.
I think I would say a lot of investors need a change. I think as much as we've talked about changing women, I think a lot of investors have to change how they evaluate companies and their evaluative mechanisms. I think if that changes, I think you'll see a lot more successful companies run by women.
And I'll quote a line that I shared with my friend Jan, which is leaning in is fine, but kicking ass is better.
Ah, yes.
So the point being, you can talk about all these stuff, but you need to invest in women-led companies and to have, the Susan Jobs and whatever else it is.
Marcia Zuckerberg, we've heard it.
All of that stuff. You need to have that validation. So you're not going to have it unless you invest in it. If you have the money and you want to drive the change, just do it.
Right. And mine has to do with sex, as it often does. I know in the venture landscape that some of the hurdle is that they want to sleep with me and they think I want to sleep with them. And if I could wipe something away, they'd get that out of their head and we just would invest.
Yes. So don't.
Yeah. So we got to get sex out of the picture.
Well, I have never heard that answer. I have to tell you.
Yeah. I think that's the fundamental issue here is sex.
Is the problem between men? Men are from Venus, women are from Mars.
That's or that they just want sex.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't.
And they're distracted.
All right, I'm going to stop you there. Okay, thank you so much, this panel.
All right.
Thanks very much.